Hi, I'm Sarah Schultz, and this is People Over Politics. I'm a committed community member, as well as a candidate for the Michigan House District in the 98th, which includes parts of Bay County and Midland counties. The community members we have on our show today will be discussing education, and namely the critical shortage of teachers and other educators in our schools in Michigan, especially in our rural areas. This issue is so important to the future of our children and our state. I hear about this issue from educators all the time, and I'm connected personally to it because my husband is a teacher in Bay County. He has over 19 years of service in the classroom, and he teaches K through 5 music, so he sees all of the entire population of the whole elementary in the district. I see how hard he works for his students all these years and how education and the school environment has changed over the years as we have devalued teachers and underfunded schools in the last few decades. I also see how weary he is when he comes home at night at the end of each day, still so committed to his students and his profession, but bone tired from shouldering the burden of the job. I also have a lifelong friend who is a high school assistant principal, and she's a former teacher and has been working in education for 20 years, and she told me just this week that they started this school year without enough teachers to fill their classrooms. There just weren't enough candidates. She says that she's been at job fairs where 40 applicants come in to fill hundreds of jobs, and she has to settle on hiring teachers who weren't quite qualified just to fill her openings. When I asked her why this is, she mentioned teacher pay, but she also said that just as important is the impact of standardized testing on the role of the teacher and the lack of civility and respect that teachers get from students and parents in the community and the political realm. She said to me, "Why would anyone want to go into teaching? You rack up the same amount of student loans for half the pay as other professions, and you go into the classroom and you have to teach to a test and you get no respect." She told me she's actually counseled students out of teaching. How sad is that? A 20-year veteran teacher who's now in the position of hiring teachers, and she's telling her students not to go into teaching. Well, the folks we have today know all about this important issue. We have Renee Baker. She's the president of our local chapter of the MEA. Mark Hackbarth, who is a veteran teacher and current president of our local teachers union. Anna Geib, she's a 16-year teacher in the classroom. And Tanya Ross, who's a paraprofessional and the president of the Paraprofessionals Union. So welcome to all of you. Thank you so much for taking your time and joining me today, and thank you for your service to the students in our community in the classrooms. So I heard recently that according to a study performed by the Citizens Research Council of Michigan, which just came out last year, that preparatory institutes are down, for teachers, are down 66%. And if you couple that with the fact that our current teaching staff are aging and getting later in their career, and over 32% of teachers are between the ages of 40 and 50, then we can start to see that there's definitely a current teacher shortage, and that teacher shortage is going to be more and more exacerbated as the years go on. So Renee, I would like to start with you and ask you what you think about what's driving these statistics from what you've seen with the teachers that you work with.
Thank you, Sarah, for having all of us on today on this critical issue that is in public education today. The one thing I do want to say is that, and I was very pleased that you put that in your announcement, that this is a shortage of educators in general, administrators, secretary, paraprofessionals, food service workers, custodians, and bus drivers, as well as the teachers. It is because schools have changed dramatically. What we hear out there many times by people that it has to do with low pay. But frankly, is it low pay? Because as these educators will attest to, we've never been the highly paid professions. Part of that might be due to the fact that, you know, it's a predominantly female profession. Which could impact that. But more recently, there's been a lot of legislation that has impacted that even further. For instance, the defunding of our public schools. Not only did program get cut, and therefore teachers cut during that time period, and it was no longer a preferable profession to go into at the college level, but it also cut people's pay. And many of us were frozen in our pay. We had teachers that were on the first pay grade level of a teacher for over 8 years. Wow. Cost of living in the meantime went up. All of those things were impacting people as they were trying to pay massive student loan debts because college tuition has went so high and they've had to borrow so much money. On top of that, legislation came about that they mandated that the schools no longer could pay above a certain level on insurance premiums. And so we, as educators, started to have to pay a portion of that premium if you were lucky to even have insurance, which many of our support staff people have no insurance at all. And as you had said before, in comparison to other professions, they're coming out of a 4-year college program just like a teacher does with the same debt load, being paid twice as much as what a teacher would. And so, you know, people are having to weigh then, you know, do I want to come out, have more difficulty paying off that debt, and so forth. But I think the thing that I hear most in my office, because I help people retire, every day they come into my office and I help them to get through that application process, is the stress. The stress factors are the piece that is so different and profoundly different. I always tell people that are even my retirees after they've left the profession for 5 years, you could not go into this profession. After 5 years, you would be so out of step with what's going on currently. We're facing a lot of social issues with student violence and you know, various economic problems that kids face at home, and you couple that with you know, no support in guidance counselors or in, you know, the discipline with the seclusion and restraint laws that are there, and it just really has profoundly affected. You layer that with all of the new educational reform initiatives that are out there that keep getting put on everyone's plate for work, and people will tell you that they are constantly working. As you said, your husband is just dead dog tired when he comes home. He just is very exhausted from it all. And so it's probably one of the reasons why we see as many as 100,000 credentialed people in the state of Michigan that aren't even teaching in the state. So, you know, it is all of these things together. We have to look at it, as well as retirement, the higher cost of retirement. The retirement system has been diminished in quality, no insurance when they retire, but at a higher cost to the newer employees. And so they have more out of their pocket when what they do get paid for a low salary, and it many times pushes them right into poverty level for living. As a teacher.
Right. So. After giving so much to the students for all of those years.
Yeah, and to the community.
Yeah, and to the community. And that's an amazing statistic. Over 100,000 people are living in the state of Michigan who are credentialed to be a teacher, but they're not teaching. Meanwhile, we, the state of Michigan, are facing an educator shortage. That's amazing. Anna, I wonder if I could just kind of turn to you. So Renee talked about some of the stressors, some of the things that that impact teachers and maybe impact decisions that teachers make about whether to stay in the classroom. You've been teaching for 16 years, and again, thank you so much to your service to our students. I wonder if you could share any stories about some of the challenges that you or your teacher colleagues face in the school, maybe some of the things that Renee spoke about.
Well, one of the things she mentioned was the shortage. It's not just teachers, it's paraprofessionals. it's bus drivers. And one of the things we have seen lately is the shortage of substitute teachers, and that impacts us and puts more stress on us. For example, recently we had a colleague in my department who was gone for a while for a teacher, for a leave of absence for her family, and we couldn't find one person who was qualified to teach in her area who could do a long-term substitute position. So we had 2 substitutes, and I stepped in to cover her position. And I did it gladly for my colleague and the students, one of whom was my son in her classroom. But it would have been best if we could have found somebody who was qualified. It didn't used to be such a struggle. When I had my maternity leave, for example, years ago, and you found somebody who could teach and could take a long-term sub position. It didn't used to be such a struggle, but now it is. And not only that, but I have colleagues in the elementary who have had professional development opportunities that they planned for, that they arranged a substitute for, and then the day came and they said, you can't go because we need your sub to cover a kindergarten teacher's position. That should not happen. But it does, because there is a dire shortage of substitutes as well as teachers.
Yeah. Wow. Actually, my husband had that same experience recently. He had a professional development, experience all planned, ready to go. And teachers, as you all know, have to have those professional development experiences to keep their credentials. So he was going to go, and he tried to get a sub, and no sub picked up the job. And so he decided to just go in and teach that day rather than leave the school without a sub, because he knew what the impact would be on the school and the rest of the teachers who would have to cover.
And the result of that is many times people are going in sick.
Yeah.
Or they're leaving their family home sick.
Yeah.
Or, they're making life decisions that may not be best for everybody in the community because of those things. Or I've had some classrooms where they've doubled the classrooms up, and they put, with one teacher, they put 2 classes in that one room. Had a paraprofessional cover for a while, just different things that happen, and it impacts.
Administrators are covering too.
Yeah.
Takes away from their duties and their help that they can offer too when issues arise.
Right. You had one less adult in the school to be able to do that work. Wow.
And a lot of the substitute shortage is a result, again, of the retirement pension reform.
Right.
And some of the rules that went along with that. And so many retirees couldn't come back and actually do substitute work. And so that is why it profoundly impacted. After 2010, we started to really see the shortage.
Do you want to talk a little bit more about those rules that were put in place?
Well, it started as an initiative, which was probably a good thing by legislators, because there was an erosion of the retirement system. What was happening was administrators were actually retiring, coming back and actually doing the administrative work for the same pay or more, but the district didn't have to pay the pension because they were doing it through a private third party.
Okay.
Well, legislators got wind of that. They tried to stop it by making that illegal to go through a third party and do contract work, but they didn't realize that the substitute system had already been privatized too, and so that was all being run by a third party. So that's where it impacted. We no longer, people were no longer using the bridge between retirement of teaching and getting their Social Security. Many of them were using substitute as a bridge of financially to get to those places, and they no longer could do that after 2010.
And that privatization has also impacted that substitute teacher shortage. I have a friend who used to sub, and she was excellent, and she did many long terms in world language and in English and many departments. She now tutors. She's an excellent tutor as well, but she quit subbing because when they privatized, just the paperwork became too much. She said, it's just not worth it to me. The pay is less than it used to be, and the demands on me just to do the paperwork were more. She did the paperwork once for one of the companies. They lost it. She had to do it again, and at that point, she said, "I'm done."
Yeah.
So that's just another obstacle.
Right, for sure. Wow. So, Tanya, I know that paraprofessionals have faced struggles with pay, with benefits, with hours. Those are things that you and I have talked about quite a bit. But as we just discussed, this shortage is not just in teachers, it's also in all educators, including paraprofessionals and bus drivers. I'd wonder if you could talk a little bit about some of the maybe the more socioeconomic issues or social issues that students bring from home into the classroom that you and your colleagues have to care for as part of your work, and how that has impacted you and your colleagues, and maybe how that has changed in the years that you've been doing this work.
Yes, children nowadays seem a lot more anxious, a lot more angry, violent. We have paras that are bruised, bitten, things thrown at them. It's overwhelming for them. It's hard. It's hard work. And then when we do have a sub shortage, we're moved around. So then there's not as much help for those kids. It's just like a vicious circle. The angriness, the violence that we see, the cursing, it wasn't like that when I first started, and I've been there 20 years.
Wow. And can you just tell us a little bit about some of the work that a paraprofessional does in the schools so that everyone can understand?
Yeah. Paraprofessionals are mostly now with children with learning disabilities or physical disabilities. We do lunch duties. We do AM, PM supervision to make sure that the kids are safe when they're arriving to and from school. But for the most part now, we're mostly with special needs children.
Yeah. And maybe I'm wondering if you could help us understand the impact to the school when you don't have enough paraprofessionals in the school doing that support.
Yeah, the children suffer when you have to be moved around, or somebody doesn't have a para that day. Then that sets some of them off. They don't have the consistency that they're used to.
And I imagine it's not just the children who are assigned to a paraprofessional specifically that suffers, but probably every other child.
Yes.
It has, an impact when we don't have that.
It does,
in
yeah.
the school. Can you tell me a little bit about what you might know about the shortage? So when we started this past school year or the one before, were we fully staffed with paraprofessionals? How hard is it to find somebody to do that job and to stay in the job?
There's a lot of turnover for paraprofessionals.
Yeah.
A lot of turnover. Way too much turnover. I don't know where even to begin with that, because it seems, like I've been there 20 years, but you might have one that's there for a short time until they figure out exactly what the job entails. Then they're like, well, I didn't sign up for this.
I can tell you that most of my schools have have an open position all the time in paraprofessional, and many times multiple. I think Meridian schools may have like 3 open paraprofessional positions. They have also, with the new laws for the Affordable Care Act, they try to keep everybody's hours under 6 hours so that they don't have to pay insurance for the paraprofessionals. And so you have these 3-hour, 4-hour positions, and they're just being paid like minimum wage, and barely above minimum wage, if that. And so we can't fill them. People they can go down to McDonald's or to Myers and get a job that pays above that pay grade with more hours and more consistency.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that has really impacted the paraprofessional.
In a tight labor market where lots of places are looking for people for jobs, why would you work at a place where you're only part-time, no benefits, and you might get scissors thrown at you?
Yes.
So, you know, it's,
Yeah.
Right.
there's that fact.
And that is the truth. And that's what many of them are saying.
Yeah.
Why would I go there to get beat up? I
Wow.
didn't go into
Yes.
this to be beat up.
Absolutely. And it's such a critical role in the school.
Absolutely.
And we're not able to keep a consistent workforce
Yeah.
for all of these reasons.
And we always talk about the teacher shortage, but we don't talk
Yeah.
about the shortage of all of these bus drivers.
And the parish, the subs for paras, it's the hours. And like you might
Yeah.
have a day where you come in at 9 and work for 40 minutes, then have 40 minutes off, and it's
Wow.
not like 8 to 4.
Yeah.
It's not like that.
Really
There's big
inconsistent.
chunks out of your
Yeah.
day, and nobody wants to come and do that.
Tanya, you probably remember, it used to be a lot of the paras were parents, like a
Yes.
stay-at-home
I
mom.
was, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So that was what they did during the day when their kids were at school, and there's less of those people now that
Yeah.
are either willing to do it or available to do it.
Yeah.
So now you're trying to fill it with other people too,
Yeah.
and that's
Yeah.
more difficult.
Wow. Well, Mark,
Exactly.
you're a veteran teacher.
Yeah,
and
we
also,
won't say how many.
and also the union president. I wonder if you could speak a little more about maybe student testing and the teacher evaluations and how they impact this stress level of teachers and their ability to teach. I know this could be an entire show
that's
on that issue, but maybe if you could share some of your thoughts, or maybe give a story about how that impacts things.
You know, and I guess I'll start with the whole evaluation thing. From when I started, I mean, there were always teacher evaluations, but the amount of, like, accountability is not the right word, but how much you're held accountable for what's on that evaluation and the pressure it puts on. The evaluation, like itself, the tool, actually has some things in it that's pretty good about improving your teaching. The problem is, as soon as you put a rating on someone, that changes it. That changes the whole ballgame. So it's a lot of extra stress. So teachers fill out a self-evaluation to start with, which takes a lot of time, and then you have your observations where you respond to your observations. You're collecting data to show, or collecting artifacts to show how you're doing all these things at a certain level. And sometimes that's time away from planning what you're going to do with your students, actually working with your students, that sort of thing. So it's a lot more pressure, and it adds to the stress level. And then you add in the student testing, where you're held at least partially accountable for how students do, yet there's so many variables that impact that. It's not just the teacher in the room. Yeah, obviously there's previous teaching, but it's home life, it's, you know, nutrition, it's what stress they're under.
Yeah.
So it's just added layers of stress to people. So you have people that are my level experience and more that maybe would have retired 5 or 6 years from now that are saying, it's just not worth it anymore, and are retiring now. Or you have newer people that said, I had no idea it was going to be like this. And, you know, they can say after 3 or 4 years, I'm just going to go do something else. And we have those people on both ends. And Renee will tell you, she meets with those all the time.
Yeah, especially now with the new evaluation tool and the new tenure reforms, they're tied together. And so if there's any defunding of the schools and programs are cut, there no longer is any kind of seniority protection. You know, it's the person with the lowest rating on the evaluation that gets laid off first. And so then that takes away the collegiality of working together. I mean, the impact is huge.
Yeah, and that's a bit, and also the testing just on a student, looking at the students as well, it's a lot more pressure on the students too. And it's just, you know, I don't know how you feel about it when you see the kids, like, when I'm proctoring the M step, you know, our Michigan test, and I see all these kids doing that test, I'm thinking, this is so inappropriate for kids, what we're doing to them. And it takes away instructional time too.
As a parent, I've told my own kids, do your best, but don't get stressed about it.
Right.
But inevitably, I've seen them get stressed about it.
Well, they feel the stress of the educational environment.
And teachers get stressed over it too, and it's more high stakes than it should be. And, you know, data is important to inform per kid how you want to move forward with that student, but the whole idea that a student, like all students, should be able to do the same thing at the same time. That just goes against child development and what we know as professionals.
Absolutely.
So it's just layer of stress.
Yeah. And my daughter also has that test anxiety.
Right, exactly.
And as a mom, I have to do the same thing you do, Anna. Just, you know, you have to do
Right.
your best. Like, this isn't a judgment on you as a person and all of those things. And so that times every student in every classroom.
And don't get me wrong, teachers have no issue with being evaluated, like having people come and say, hey, you
Right.
know, have you thought about approaching it this way, or I like how you're doing
For
this,
sure, yeah.
and getting input. But again, as soon as you put a label on something,
Yeah.
it changes
Yeah.
everything.
So we could talk for hours.
Oh, yes.
And I do want to make sure we're getting into some solutions.
Oh,
so
exactly.
to kind of close, right, to move into that to closing, Renee, I wonder if you could talk a little bit about, and
I'll be
you know,
quite
a ton
quick
of time
about it.
of some solutions.
Yeah, I would say, number one, we need to have funding for our schools to be appropriate levels so that we can have the programs for support and have the appropriate staff there to handle the higher needs that we have. I would also say evaluation reform would be something that we need to see. We may want to look at other funding mechanisms to actually fund our schools so that they're more consistent and aren't fluctuating all the time. I would also say seclusion and restraint, which is kind of where Tanya was going. We have kids right now that if they have a meltdown, we're clearing the whole classroom and allowing the disruptive student to stay. And as we have talked about, sometimes that means that whole classroom gets torn apart. So there's a lot of different things. I would say community reforms are things too that we should look at. Maybe offering some mortgage discounts to encourage people to move to our community, or tax breaks, or even local student loan forgiveness programs that would help them to handle some of the debt load.
Those are great ideas for solutions. Thank you.
Yeah. I also think we probably need a fundamental change in how we approach the profession of teaching and the structuring of it, because we don't support the new educators in a way that allows them to be successful. We don't have the time for the collegiality that we used to have if you go back 15, 20 years ago. Maybe it's time to go to your younger teachers, our apprentice teachers, and your experienced ones, our master teachers, who may not have a classroom of their own, but they're working with several of the younger teachers to improve that, just so that the younger teachers feel like they're supported and are able to do their job, and the experienced teachers feel like they're making a difference in what's going on. And you need to have the time. You need the time to plan. You need the time to meet with each other. And that time just gets eaten away by other initiatives and other things.
Well, thank you for those ideas and those solutions. I think another one that's sort of overarching is bringing the respect back to the profession of an educator, right? That has been sort of under attack legislatively and in our society for a long time. And I firmly believe that our teachers are public servants that should be treated with respect and thanked for their service. And so thank you for the third time in this time for your service. Well, that's all the time we have today, and I just want to end by, again, thanking you all for taking your precious time to come and talk with me about this important issue. I appreciate each of you and your thoughts and sharing your stories. And to those of you listening or watching from home, if you have any stories that you'd like to share or issues that you would like us to address in our show, then you can email me directly at sarah@sarah4mi.org. We look forward to our next show, where we will address another issue that impacts the lives of everyday folks like me and you, because it has always been about putting people over politics. Thank you so much.